What are you drinking?
Pinot Grigio.
Okay. Yeah.
How are you? How's Barb doing?
Get the mics.
How's Barb? She's not up and walking yet. She is? Wow. I did not know that. Oh, that's good. I didn't realize they get them up. Sunday, one big one.
Just a taste of slice of lemons. And
Oh, that's okay.
With Nancy Turner, who's right over here on the live stream. We have a few housekeeping chores before we begin. Let me see. The first thing is about the bar. The bar is open all the way to the end, and so you can go there and order a drink at any time. It is a cash bar, but no cash. Just a tap or a card is what will work. And we're going to pass some hats around. Indivisible Naperville runs on donations. That's the only way we've been able to keep our events going for all these 8 years, and now even more than ever. So the bartender's going to get a whole bunch of it, and whatever's left over.
what am I getting now?
Tips.
Oh, did you want to open a tab or do you want to open these?
And where are they? There's Beth, there's Paulette, and there's darling Sarah. So they're going to come around. You've got loose dollars in your pocket, whatever works for you works for us. Thank you very much. Bathrooms are next, so that will call to my right. How about snacks? I see the snacks are okay. Just check the snack table back right. And I hope there's enough for everyone to take a look at. You've got a couple little pieces of paper. One of them has a QR code on it, maybe 2 QR codes. And it will allow you to go to live streaming for this event. You can share it on your Facebook page and let all your followers see what's
Starting the
there.
tab?
And it also allows you to donate to Indivisible Naperville. And there will be an ability to sign up on the little flyers that are in the holders on the tables. That QR code will allow you to sign up for our email list. That email list is magic. Okay, the format for tonight. We're going to invite each of our speakers. Can we keep it down a little bit? Yeah, I'm a retired teacher. All right, so each of our speakers will spend 5 to 7 minutes talking about their areas of greatest concern. I will introduce those speakers in just a minute. That will be followed by Q&A, some of those from each of you. There are cards on the tables as well, some blank cards. Pens are kind of floating around as well. If you've got a card for one of our speakers, a question for one of our speakers, please write it on that card and raise your hand. And one of us with these Indivisible shirts on will come by and pick it up. All right, let me introduce our speaker. Okay, I'm going to talk about Renato Mariotti first. Well, first of all, he's 1994 Naperville Central High School graduate and is a retired 203 teacher. That makes me happy. And he followed all this by earning a BS in political science from the University of Chicago, followed by his law degree from Yale in 2001. Renato Mariotti has been a legal analyst and commentator who has appeared in outlets such as MSNBC, CNN, PBS, NPR, and even the BBC. He has also served as the legal affairs columnist for Politico magazine and has written dozens of articles that appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time magazine, and other publications. He is currently the co-host of a wonderful podcast called It's Complicated with legal and national security analyst Asha Renato. He also practices law at Paul Hastings LLP, where he represents clients facing high stakes complex litigation. But before entering private practice, he spent almost 10 years as a federal prosecutor in Chicago, investigating and prosecuting hundreds of cases in a wide variety of areas, including, and I'll just list them all, child exploitation, human trafficking, cybercrime, gun trafficking, tax evasion, fraud, obstruction of justice. And public corruption, narcotics trafficking, and more. Due to the high-profile nature of many of his cases, Renato was twice featured on American Breed, Bill Pierce's white-collar criminals. He lives right here in Naperville with his wife Jamie, his daughter Izzy, and Henry, his sweetest dog Apple. So that's Renato. We're going to get to hear from him just shortly. So let's talk about Ed Yohnka. Well, Ed's got a very brief bio on the ACLU website. And I can read it to you because it's just very short. I don't want to give my personal take on that. He began his job at the ACLU in June of 1999. He serves as the primary spokesman for the Civil Rights Advocacy Organization here in Illinois. He appears regularly on television and radio programs in Illinois.
Can you turn the volume down a little bit?
Maybe they can do it in the dark. And he has spoken throughout the nation. Yohnka also is widely cited in newspapers and publications on legal and legislative matters related to the ACLU of Illinois priorities. From 1987 to 99, he served on the staff of the American Bar Association, spending most of that time as a special presidential assistant in the ABA's Office of In 2006,
they're in the back. There's chairs.
came to my classroom here in Naperville 203. And I invited Ed to come to my class because the 8th graders studied World War II. I had a neighbor who was interned in camp studying Japanese internment. And I wanted him to speak about the Patriot Act, passed after the September 11, 2001 attack on our country. It's another problematic piece of legislation that attacks our civil rights. When he pulled out his paper copy of the Constitution, every one of my students sat up a little straighter and paid a little better attention. I'm hoping this presentation is remembered by them today especially. He's made himself available for so many events across the suburbs, here in the suburbs, and all over the state, including a recent appearance with the Wheatland Township Dems. Now let's give both Ed and Renato a warm welcome. To speak about his area of greatest concern when it comes to legal matters in this country. Ed?
First of all, thank you for all for coming out tonight. This is really a lovely spot. Renato and I have done a number of these over the past few months and few years, and it always seems we're on Zoom, and it's really nice to be in person and in a room together to do this. You know, I was thinking when Diane asked me to talk about my areas of greatest concern. I want to talk about two things in particular that I think that I'm really most concerned about right now. And this may go a little bit off of just particular legal concerns. And the first is, I am troubled and concerned over the fact that we are debating the actions of the Trump administration without ever debating the justifications for those actions. So, let me say, you know, one of the things that we hear, for example, we've seen the administration now spend 6 months attacking people who are trans or non-binary. And they are always attacked on the basis of their danger to others, on the havoc that they wreak in sports, for example. And yet we talk about the legalities, the constitutionality, the questions about the actions they're taking, denying people much-needed medical care, denying young people the chance to participate in athletics and be socialized into community. But we never actually talk about whether or not there's anything to the underlying measures that are being used as an excuse or as a justification for the actions that are being taken. You know, let me remind you that during the campaign, Donald Trump, who, in case you've all forgotten, is a 79-year-old former reality television star, not a physician, talked about transgender health care as if he knew what the hell it was. This is a guy who literally said and pretended to his followers that children went to school in the morning with one gender and came home in the afternoon had to have surgery with no care. It's an absurdity. And the reality is that we end up debating the question of whether or not what he's doing is lawful, and we never get to the question of whether or not what he's doing actually has any resonance in terms of accuracy or truth. The other place where, and I'll just say, I think in many ways, the other place, the other way we can see this nowadays is we keep debating the impact on the economy and on prices and et cetera of the tariffs. But there's literally no justification for the tariffs themselves. You know, he applied a tariff or threatened a tariff to Brazil, with whom we actually have a trade surplus, because he doesn't like their prosecution of a former president who tried to instigate a coup. I mean, maybe he felt kinship with him, I don't know. But the reality is that again, we don't get at the heart of this. And I think nowhere does this show up more, and it will lead me to my second concern. Nowhere does this show up more than in his rationalizations and justifications for his mass deportation and detention program. Donald Trump sold America, or sold at least 49.8% of America, on the idea that there was some sort of massive crime problem that was caused by people who were undocumented in this country. Number one, that is not true. It wasn't then. It isn't now. But that rationalization is being weaponized to engage in a practice in which armed, heavily armed, masked, unidentified men are traveling around the cities and towns of the United States, swooping up people without any identification, without any warrants, and without any justification, including American citizens, and disappearing them. And so, again, while we should talk about those actions, and I will in a moment, I think that part of this is now he's justifying, based on his immigration policy, the need to carry it out, and fears of protests against it, he's justifying bringing the military into LA, where his Secretary of Homeland Security says that that military will stay until they liberate the people of Los Angeles and California from their elected officials. That's a civil war. That's not an immigration issue. And I think, again, one of the problems is we start by debating the tactics and the practices and not the underlying policies of what's happening. The second, and that really leads to my second gravest area of concern, which is that this is all becoming completely normal. That we see, again, troops in American cities parading around major parks and it is just another day in the office. We see the president threaten to strip away citizenship, which he can't do, from native-born citizens, but also strip away citizenship from elected officials simply because he disagrees with them. And all of this is happening while, again, we see these, sort of spectacles of armed men marauding around our streets, swooping up people and scaring people. I was talking today with the person who is the head of the Illinois Head Start Association, who was talking about the program she talks to every day, where children have just stopped showing up for these programs because their parents are so afraid to send them, not knowing if they'll be there when the children come home. And this fear, I think, without any denial, is becoming institutionalized into our country in a way where this is now just the new normal that we live in. And it's all based on a lie. It's all based on things which are not true. It's all based on his need to be, strong, to be whatever it is that fills him. And I think that what I fear is in many ways, there are so many people who have just caved to, oh, he's right, this is what we have to do, and therefore we're going to do it without ever debating the merits of whether or not this is accurate or isn't. And so, while I look forward to the conversations, and I hope that one thing we can kind of recenter ourselves on is the need constantly to go back to first principles and the need to go back to fundamental facts about actually what is and what is not happening and what it is that we need to live in a society and be safe and free. Thank you very much.
Okay. Look, it's great to see everybody here tonight and the turnout here tonight, because I think for a little while, I think one of the last times we did this was right after the election. We did a Zoom from Indivisible, Illinois, and I think people were just sort of shell-shocked. People after the election didn't know what to do. Everyone was frozen. It's sort of like, well, what do we do now? It's like the aliens have taken over, or there's been a nuclear holocaust. What do we do now? And I can understand that. And I can understand after the election being shocked and scared and disappointed. But you don't get anywhere or accomplish anything by being quiet and compliant. That's the bottom line. That's what Indivisible has been about. It's been what it's been about since 2016. And early 2017 when it was founded. And that's what it's about today. And we're never going to make any progress without fighting. So I just want to say that in front of these. So I guess, let me just say, I was asked to tell me what concerns me most. And so instead of just talking about what concerns me about the use of the courts and the rule of law, I'm talking here today. I was looking at it was all about the rule of law in the courts. And do we think there's still a rule of law? I would say what concerns me the most right now, in terms of what's been happening, is not what's happening inside the government, is what's happening inside United States government office buildings, where there are thousands and thousands and thousands of government workers who are losing their jobs. I'd say this is somebody who you can see that on the front lines. I get a very generous book, a very generous introductions by Diane. And it kind of at the end, Diane said, hey, by the way, Renato also practices law. Well, I will tell you, I spent a lot of time representing people who interact with government. And one thing that I have seen since Trump took office, is a heck of a lot less enforcement of the laws in the United States, particularly against companies, big business, rich people, people who are highly regulated, etc. There has been enforcement, but the enforcement is targeted against people who he doesn't like. People who he wants to push around. People who he thinks that he can get something out of, or his administration thinks that he can get something out of. That is very, very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. It's not happening inside a courtroom, but it's happening with subpoenas that are sent down. It's happening with the subpoenas that aren't sent down. It's happening with cases that are getting dismissed. It's happening where now there's all sorts of regulatory opportunities for certain businesses, whereas others are being targeted and are on the run. It's happening when law firms are targeted, universities are targeted, companies are targeted, where there's a reason why billionaires are lining up in Trump's inauguration. There's a reason why even Harvard was fighting Trump. Now they're talking about maybe getting to the peace table, coming to deal with Trump. Why? Because the federal government controls our money, and federal investigations of our power. That concerns me a lot. And it concerns me not just because that soft power that's being used by Trump is pushing around while companies, schools, government agencies, in state and local government agencies, but also because what the Trump administration is not doing puts even more pressure on our state and local elections. One of the things that has been a major success here in Indivisible Naperville and Indivisible DuPage has been the election of a blue wave here in DuPage and also in Illinois. Here. And there's a difference. We made a difference. I was talking to some folks in the back there. They're like, oh, we're on Team Mary Kay O'Brien, who got elected to the Illinois Supreme Court. She's the reason we have reproductive freedom in Illinois. That vote on the Illinois Supreme Court is the reason that you have control over your own bodies. There's been a lawsuit, a judicial watch, the right and conflict and the right wing is coming after Illinois to try to interfere in our elections, because we know in New Hampshire we have pretty fair elections, because we have a county clerk who's a Democrat, we have an attorney general who's a Democrat, who's trying to fight for our rights here in Illinois. But the amount of pressure that's being put on state and local officials is enormous. Kwame Raoul now has to try to do the job of the Justice Department, things that they would do. The Illinois EPA is trying to fill the void left by the United States EPA. And all at the same time, Illinois officials are trying to defend themselves from lawsuits by the administration. So if you had asked me what is concerning me the most today, that is concerning me the most today. Is there also a concern about the law and about the rule of law? Yes. This discussion today is not wasting our time. But to me, it's more about a future threat as much as it is about a present threat. Are there present threats to our freedoms? Yes. And when people are dragged off the streets of the United States and disappear, that's a threat to all of us. Let's just be clear about it. 100%. That is a threat to all of us. When people are removed from the United States without due process, is that a threat to all of us? Yes, it is. But what am I the most concerned about? We are not yet in the spot. We are getting really close to the line where the Trump administration essentially, are they going to thumb their nose at judges and time? We're not quite there yet. Right now they're playing games with judges. They sort of pretend like they're complying, but they still show up at court, they still say things, they try to pretend and have a certain sort of demeanor like they are complying with laws. But if they ever get to a spot where they just don't give an F, then we're in a really different spot. And if I had to say what my other concern is what's going to happen when we get there? What's going to happen when you've talked about all these shows I've been on or different things? What's going to happen when the people that I have, been on television shows are being targeted by the administration? Or we have United States versus George Conrad, or United States versus Mariotti. or things like that where the administration is going after local critics, using criminal investigation. That really scares me. And the fact that I think that that's possible scares me a great deal. Right now they're using their soft power. Oh yeah, let's shoot a subpoena to Harvard. Oh, we'll deny some funding here and there. Oh, we aren't going to prosecute these people anymore, we'll let them go. But we aren't seeing yet a decision that, you know what, we're going to investigate and prosecute them. That we haven't seen yet. When that day comes, then we're going to be alone.
Indivisible Naperville is going to start with our questions, and we prepared 8 of them for Indivisible Naperville. Do we have some from the audience, perhaps?
Do we have any questions from the audience? I think there's cards being waved.
All right, we're going to send someone back to pick up those questions. Lisa, do you want to start with your question?
Sure. So the first question is about ICE, because that is in the news quite a bit these days. The questions are, is this something a protest can be effective against? How do we ice out at the local level? I know in Illinois there are they're very good about some laws about ICE. So that's good. Is the only thing that we can do right now is to urge our down and local lawmakers to ban ICE agents from hiding their identities. I think that's called the Visible Act. And then how do we stop the kidnapping of citizens and non-citizens alike, especially children?
Well, that's a lot.
Pick a couple.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, something you all know. In Illinois, we have the Trust Act, which ensures that state and local law enforcement cannot cooperate in the execution of federal immigration enforcement absent a warrant for a particular criminal investigation. That law was adopted a few years ago. It was improved a few years after that because of really hard work from a lot of advocacy groups, including the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. One of the most important things that we can do is to continue to remind our local officials and local law enforcement that they are responsible for complying with the Trust Act. I think that assuring that we don't get into the situation that we're seeing in Texas and Florida and South Carolina and other places where state and local law enforcement, Tennessee, where state and local law enforcement are actually actively engaged in the enforcement of federal civil immigration enforcement, I think is the first thing that we need to do. The second thing is, and you mentioned this, I think it is really critically important to keep raising up the issue of the way in which ICE is behaving and performing their duty on our streets. And let me just say this, and I promise I won't do this on every answer, but it is not an accident that for the first time in the time that he has been president, both for the first term and the second term, except during family separation, Donald Trump is underwater in terms of the popularity of his immigration policy. It is not an accident. It is because people are so offended by what's happening. And so the next step is to turn that into action. And, there are efforts on the federal level to bar ICE from engaging in enforcement actions without identifying themselves. I would encourage you all to reach out to our members of Congress. Thank Tammy Pepper, who signed on as a co-sponsor of that legislation last week. Encourage others to do so. There is going to be a state panel is, there are a myriad of stories that you can hear, whether it's Omar Fuego Garcia, whether it's, the 73-year-old man from Cuba who died in ICE detention, who was approved to come to this country first in 1966. And he died in ICE detention in the last 2 weeks. We have to tell these stories wherever we can. Because that narrative, that way, even as groups like mine are doing litigation around these questions, we have to continue to tell those stories. Because the lie, again, back to these false narratives, the lie that they are after the worst of the worst is crazy. I sat in a courtroom 2 weeks ago and heard a government official acknowledge that ICE is going around Chicago with just a book of blank warrants in their back pocket. They stop people, they handcuff them, they question them, and if they think they have a reason to detain them, then they fill out the warrant. That's going after the worst of the worst. That's going after the list of people who are dangerous. And we have to continue kind of lift those stories up and tell them, because ultimately, Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan will not stop until the American people make them stop. And we have to be the catalyst.
That's good. I'll just add, I agree with what he said. I guess, but one thing I would add is how important it is for us to try to shine a light on and bring transparency to a process that the Trump administration very much wants to hide behind those. And I do give credit to elected officials who are trying to make surprise visits, unannounced visits to ICE facilities, and trying to get a light on what is going on inside those facilities. Because anybody who spends time or interacted with the immigration system in this country knows that even during a normal era, there are issues with that system. Okay? It is not the way people assume that system functions. And right now, just the massive upsurge in activity, there are very serious reasons to be concerned about the way in which that system is functioning. So it's very, very important for us, because part of the question, a big part of the question is what can we do? To me, there's a real importance of documenting, and all the smartphones that we have now, documenting what you see, documenting what you hear, recording what you see and what you're hearing, making sure that people's voices are heard, because sometimes people who know the most about how ICE is acting feel like they're scared, understandably, to speak up about it. So you can be their voice. You can be the one lending a voice and amplifying their message of what is going on, because I think you're right. When the American people learn about some of the activity, they're not supporting.
The question is, what do you recommend we do to address attacks on voting rights and voting integrity leading up to 2026? The question is even more specific in mention of the 2 judicial watch cases, purging of the voting rolls, and the 2-week allowance for mail-in ballots after election day. In some states it's like 3 days. It's very short. We have 2 weeks for mail ballots to be received. And then the question is this a concern for you? Why or why not? I'm sure it is a concern.
That's not a solution, not to make something else.
Right, he was talking about ICE forcing people to follow when they come out of detention. One thing I'll just do before I answer your very excellent, the audience's excellent question. I know you guys know what's best and point. I'll just note that right now we've also been seeing Navi territory and have a little bit of a civil war over the last week over the Epstein files. And I think one thing that's important, though, is an important takeaway, is that not everyone who voted for Donald Trump sees things exactly the same way. And there are people who follow him, who support him, who voted for him, who nonetheless can have differences of opinion about Donald Trump operates. And, for example, some of the podcast hosts who really supported Donald Trump are very concerned about some of the immigration activity that has been going on. And so having some line and showing what happens, I think makes a difference. Look at Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch, just in case you're not familiar with the organization, this is Tom Fitton's organization. He's a Trumper through and through, a MAGA, right-wing zealot, and basically uses FOIA requests and often vote. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, my bad. Did I say he was an attorney? Oh, yeah, he's definitely not an attorney, although Trump gets quote-unquote legal views from him. But yeah, I didn't think I said he was an attorney. So, but in any event, yeah, so he uses FOIA requests, that organization uses a lot of FOIA requests, generally bogus lawsuits, to try to draw attention or call into question things that we are going to question. And Trump, of course, is great at this, right? He files these lawsuits against media organizations and anyone who criticizes it and so on. So that's what Judicial Watch does. And they're doing that here where they have a lawsuit that they brought, basically trying to claim that the Illinois Board of Elections is not doing its job, not maintaining the voter rolls properly. And the Illinois Board of Elections is properly raises the defense, and we're asking for a motion to dismiss the hearings today, that this is something that should be happening at the county level under Illinois law. They're not even responsible for that. They have no ability to go to the counties to do that. And one thing that I will also note is it ties into something that I told you about earlier. The United States Justice Department indicated their interest in getting involved in that case. That's where your federal taxpayer dollars are going. That's what the Justice Department is involved in. And what is the purpose of that? It's to try to feed into right-wing narratives that elections in Illinois and states like Illinois that are blue states are somehow questionable or corrupt, which is not the case. There's no evidence of that. And to try to create an environment where they can call intimidation by voter ID.
The other lawsuit, as you know, that's going on is the lawsuit that's been brought by a downstate member of Congress. It's headed to the Supreme Court, where the question is whether or not Illinois can extend the period of time after the elections for mail-in ballots to arrive as long as they are postmarked by election day. As we know, this has long served as a mechanism, especially for soldiers serving overseas and others to be able to do that. And we literally have now a claim that a member of Congress says it diminishes his right to serve if he wins by fewer votes than is announced on the night of the election. And so therefore, that all ballots should be cut off from being accepted on the night of the election itself. And I think, to Renato's point, this is simply two things. It is, number one, an attempt to sort of federalize or nationalize electoral processes, which we've worked very hard on expanding the franchise in Illinois. And number two, it's an effort to undermine and claim somehow that votes that come in through the mail because they are mailed on election day are somehow fraudulent or suspect. And these are things we just have to continue to resist. The voting, we ought to look for ways to expand the franchise in Illinois, not contract it. And active Donald Trump, who allegedly thinks of himself as a state genius, can't figure out when he loses an election, is not a reason to change voting processes here in Illinois.
Did my wine go somewhere?
These three together, I think I have a few more.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
One, how do we fight back
What?
when we have a
Oh, it was.
Supreme Court how do we start Project 2025? What will it take to get SCOTUS to grow a set and do the right thing? How do we influence John Roberts to protect the judiciary?
You know, can I tell you, the last question is the most interesting for me, and without regards to the Chief Justice, but I think to the conservative majority. It is really startling, I think, the way in which, in a number of cases recently, including the case around birthright citizenship and nationwide injunctions, the degree to which the Supreme Court of the United States does not seem willing or able to acknowledge the hard work and process that happens in district courts around the country to actually get evidence and put that evidence into the record in order to make a decision. I don't know how to change their minds about that. You know, I'm just saying on the birthright citizenship, which you've seen, you know, the ACLU, along with a number of groups, has filed a national class action lawsuit literally the day of the Supreme Court decision, and have gotten a nationwide injunction through that process, so the birthright citizenship enforcement should not take place. But I think that the larger question here about what to do and how to do it is twofold. And I think I'm going to return to a theme, which is the United States Constitution is a floor, it's not a ceiling. And we have created additional protections around reproductive health care, around gender-affirming care, around voting rights, around immigrant rights in the state of Illinois. And we need to be speaking to our state and local officials every single day to make sure that they stand up and protect those no matter what the Supreme Court of the United States says. The Supreme Court of the United States in Spermetti said that a state can enforce a ban on gender-affirming care for young people. That in no way affected anybody in the state of Illinois. And we should send that message loud and clear and keep sending it. And the second thing is that we have to continue to go out and protest and take exception with what the Supreme Court says. You know, there are lessons that we can learn from our opponents in this work, right? You know, when they lost Roe, they didn't quit. When they lost Casey in the 1990s, they didn't quit. And they didn't quit until they got to Dobbs and they overturned the constitutional right to an abortion that had been recognized for a half century. We have to have that same commitment to winning it back. And that means that we have to go out, we have to talk, we have to agitate, we have to vote for people and demand that they only vote for candidates for the federal bench who are going to, support measures and support the kinds of legal interpretations that we agree with, not necessarily on policies, but on approach. These are things that we have to do in a strategic way and not think that every time something happens in the Supreme Court, we've either won and the battle's over, or we've lost and it's time to just go home.
Yeah, I think that the excellent points. I mean, as a practical matter, can we change what the United States Supreme Court is doing right now? No, we cannot change that today. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you, right? I mean, some of these decisions I don't see it quite the same way as others. Like, for example, the ban on nationwide injunctions or universal injunctions. Ultimately, the class action, the national class action, is potentially solving it. We'll see how the Supreme Court does on that. But on things like the immunity decision, I mean, no one can defend that. I don't know how you can defend that decision. But the answer to that is not for us to sit on our hands and be like, like people where I mentioned when I was speaking a few minutes ago, right after the election, everyone's sitting at home like, well, what do we do now? I guess we're going to pack up our bags and move to Canada. I mean, that is not what we do. We're Americans. And we got this country by fighting for our rights. And most of the people in this room got the right to vote because there were a lot of women who got together and fought for their rights. So there's no reason why we can't fight for our rights today. And no one said it was going to be trying to change public opinion in this country. And I would just say, you were mentioning that on broader sense, what the Republicans did for decades, for sure, there's no question about that. They cared about the courts in a way that Democrats didn't either. I mean, the Federal Society and others cared about the courts. But look, you could just take an example that's very recent. I mean, if you look 4 years ago at this time, Donald Trump was a prime. Donald Trump had been humiliated after January 6th, where Republicans were fleeing from Donald Trump. It looked like Donald Trump had no electoral future. He looked like he was more likely to spend time in the jail cell than in the White House. And he didn't give up, and his followers didn't give up. And they fought to get this country back and move a lot of opinion in this country. And there's no reason why that can't change in a different direction, particularly since they're doing every damn thing they can to destroy so much of what makes this country so successful and has enabled so much for all of us in this country. So there's no reason why we can't fight and ultimately take back this country. I can start by talking about the law firms because I would lump them in with all sorts of others. I mean, universities and others that really are particularly vulnerable to use of soft power by the administration. And that was when I was standing up and talking to you in the beginning. That was the first thing that I mentioned because it's such an easy way for the administration to be effective. Ultimately, law firms represent clients and they need to get their regulatory approval for all sorts of things, and they can't really be seen as taking a political position on anything, and when the administration is going after them, it put a lot of them in a very tough position. That was not something my firm dealt with, but other firms did, and that was a real significant position that they were put in. Now, I could, and a lot of people are, attack and point a finger at those law firms and say they should not have paid. I personally place the blame on Trump's feet and at the administration's feet out of those firms. Firms are a collection of lawyers that are representing clients, and ultimately, just like at Harvard University, do I blame Harvard if they ultimately got a deal with the administration? There's a lot of students at Harvard and who are relying on also, the ability to come to the university and their eventual students to the university and receive a certain amount of aid. It's a very challenging position that a lot of people are put in. And I don't think that we get anywhere as a movement. And I say this is a movement because that's how I view all of us here as Indivisible. We're not political figures here. This is a group of activists here in this room. That's what I view us. And my perspective is attacking the people who are being targeted by Trump is not how we get ourselves out of this and how we build a coalition. What we do is we look to them and we say, you're being targeted, so are these people over here, and so are these people over here. We're all being targeted in a different way, and what we need is we need to band together and fight down an administration that is once again neutral to foreign policy. So that's the way I look at this. I'm all for an underground railroad. I'm all for reaching out, whether it's universities or law firms or people who are being targeted to be disappeared from this country. Because I think all of us together have an interest in ensuring that the laws are enforced in a mutual going forward.
Okay, but I've got so many interesting questions. I'm not sure which to pick. Here's one. Do blue states have an advantage in staving off overreach or persecution from the federal government? Or how can blue states protect themselves from the orange in charge?
This is interesting because I will tell you, and we didn't talk about this at the time, but last summer in June, we brought ACLU staff from all of the states that had a Democratic governor and legislature, a trifecta in both houses of their legislature, to Chicago to literally plan what we called a firewall strategy for how we would try to stave off some of the worst of these activities in our states, collectively, and drew ideas from one another. I think there are, there are a couple of things that, I believe and think we believe from that process that we're still seeing play out. Some of it you've heard me talk about tonight. We should think of our local and state governments as laboratories and places to build further protections. Let me just touch on one subject we haven't had tonight, a subject that kind of late has kept me up at night, which is education. They are coming for our curriculum next, right? The reason that they want to strip away the power of a federal Department of Education is not to have anybody in place to begin to dictate, what that you're going to have to teach that, well, maybe slavery was sometimes good in order to make federal money. I think we need to be talking to our state and local officials now, not when that comes, not when the threat comes, not when the threat comes about what they do. We're talking to them now about the kind of curriculum we want. And ensure that the steps we've taken in Illinois to teach a whole range of history continues to be enforced no matter what. So I think that in that way, it can be, we can't be that firewall because in large measure, we have elected officials who are already disposed and see in this moment that there is a value in this fight. And every time they hear from a constituent who says that they want to be part of that fight, that they want them to stand up for that, I think that is a really important thing for us all to do. And I think we should be thinking about a lot of the ways in which we can think, we can move forward by using that power at the state local level. So that may mean showing up at a library board meeting. It may mean showing up at a local school board meeting. It may mean talking to a state legislature, and I hope all of you here know exactly who your state rep or who your state senator is, and then you have them on a speed dial. Because those are the kinds of things that we're going to need over both these next 4 years, but then going forward from there as we try to build back and build and clear some of this refuse that has been put our way.
Just the original question talked about, are you better situated in your state? The answer is probably yes. And thank goodness that we've done that in the bill of blue state here, and frankly, we're counting on the reviews. So let's absolutely. And so a lot of you've been talking about a lot of the importance of the laws we have. Also, I talked about the strain on state agencies. Well, at least we have LMEP that's doing some stuff. Okay, if you care about the environment and revenue, if you care about consumer protection, at least we have an Illinois Attorney General that is trying to fight to protect consumers in Illinois, for example. So yes, it really matters. Yes, it makes a difference. And I think part of what we need to do is, first of all, on our level, I agree when you mentioned state having your state representatives immigrants, yes. But it also means rooting out and getting rid of the vestiges of Republican control that still exists in each county. We have Republicans who are trying to use this time as an opportunity to come back. I don't know if you noticed this. Did you see this comments recently about these folks in Glen Ellen saying, because there's been some riffraff in the streets, that's why you need to re-elect Republicans. I don't know if you saw this. We have a Republican state's attorney here in DuPage. I mean, maybe we should hold him responsible for all of all of the crime that does exist in our debate. My point is just this, is that if anything, this should reinforce to all of us the importance of the work we've done and the need to ensure that we kept Illinois as blue as possible for as long as possible. First of all, absolutely. And second of all, I actually think this should be an opportunity for our leaders here in Illinois to be advertising and using, yes, it's federalism's laboratory, but there are also in many ways the states are competing for resources. Don't you remember during the pandemic when the red states were all talking about how we should move down to red states? Well, maybe people should be moving here so their rights are protected, so they can raise their children and affirm their children regardless of who they are and how their children are. They can affirm who they are, and they can raise their children the way they want to, and they can make decisions for their own bodies, and they can actually ensure that they're not as afraid of walking the streets, because we don't have people carrying assault rifles in the streets and going on, and we don't have, we actually require law enforcement to identify themselves and all that. So from my perspective, this is something we should be proud of, or we should be embracing, and doing everything we can to continue to make the life of this country.
Lisa, I have to ask you what time it is. Oh, they moved downstairs again, Darby. Why don't you ask the last question? And then, because you've got more over there in the audience, I'm going to invite our speakers to give their summation at the end.
Do you want me to submit this? Is this a question?
Oh, no, it's just a statement to that.
Okay. For them?
So many good ones, let's see here. I'm gonna go with the really hard one. How close are we to a civil war, and how would it actually start?
All right, that's a really hard question. And I'm not a political scientist or sociologist. I guess my reaction to that is, what I see that concerns me, if you had asked me, not about the law, about the Trump administration, but what concerns me the most about as a change in the United States over the course of my lifetime is disinformation and the way in which technology is pulling us further apart. So many of us have friends that are addicted to their screens, where there's algorithms pushing content to them at such a rapid pace that it's really, can almost become an addictive quality to them. I think all of us have relatives and friends who believe things that are so obviously counterfactual or so absurd that it's hard to imagine that an educated or an intelligent person believes, whether it's a conspiracy theory or just an understanding of the facts that's so obviously out of provable science. So I am really concerned about that. But do I think we're on the verge of a civil war? No. I think we're, though, the fabric and some of the things that held us together as a society, some of the personal local institutions. We get together here today in Indivisible. There aren't as many civic organizations anymore where people are coming together and spending time and getting together for their local bowling league or getting together for their local church event the way that they used to in the past. But it also used to be that there were only television networks, right? And people were getting all their news from one of a few sources, one newspaper, one 3 or 4 television networks. And that's how it was when I was growing up. That's changed. And, you were mentioning what I do, and, I have a podcast. It's on my podcast is now on a network, on the Biggest Touch Network, which probably reaches more people than a lot of people. But my point being is that I'm seeing a fragmentation of ourselves into little islands. That's not necessarily a good thing. And I don't know how to change it because I'm not a political scientist or sociologist or anything like that. But it really does have me concerned for our future. Not that we're going to fight each other in an actual civil war, but that we view ourselves as separate from each other. And we're not concerned about, that's what I was trying to say earlier, we should be looking at the people victimized by Trump. The people who've been duped by Trump. All these people who thought that he was going to release the Epstein files, I feel bad for those people. I really do, because they were deceived by this man. They're victims of his deception. And if we can try to find some broad and create a coalition that will ultimately see that movement growing up.
I don't think we're close to a civil war. And I think the best way that we can ensure that we don't is to demonstrate some courage. Diane talked about how long ago I first came to her class, so this won't come as newsflash to you. I'm old. And so I live my entire life by anecdote. So I cannot resist telling a story. And I think about this story a lot. My father was born shortly before the Depression in a rural town in central Illinois. The 8th of 11 kids. You know, he grew up in a house without a bathroom and without running water. He's the first of his siblings to graduate from high school, and a week later left to go across the Pacific to find a real work. Came back and never left the little town that I grew up in. Graduated from high school, that was it. On the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated, I was with my father and a group of men in the basement of the little United Church of Christ in our small town, working on, remodeling the basement. And some guy came in and, reported the news that Martin Luther King had been killed. And one of the men there made a racialized comment about King and used the N-word. My father walked over to that man and took his hammer out of his hand and said, "You need to be here." Nobody said a word, and he went. Bullies are cowards. Bullies are cowards. And every act of courage that we show, everything that we do, every time we stand up for someone who's being hurt, every time we stand up for the right thing, even when it stinks, even when it seems slow, even when it seems hard, we move a day closer to the day we imagine and away from civil war. And I think that's the path that we need to take. I may have just made my nose as well.
That's inspiring. I tell you, it's hard sharing any sort of program with you. If I had to say what I think makes a difference, I actually think that one thing that's underrated is doing stuff. There's a lot of people who like to feel like they're making a difference by clicking a like on Facebook or Blue Sky or something like that. Or they like to feel like they've contributed something because whenever everyone gets together, they complain about a contract. And the reality is, that may make us feel good, clicking on social media. And I think as some of you know, I've had a lot of activity on social media over the course of my life. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it actually doesn't move the ball forward. And the people that really, in my opinion, get things done and move things forward are the doers. And what I'm always looking for in any group, and any time when I'm asked to sort of help or do anything, are the doers. Who are the people that are behind the scenes organizing? Who are the people going door to door and actually, getting the word out? Who are the people organizing events? Who are the people getting fundraisers together? Who are the people doing post-op campaigns? In my opinion, those are the people who make a difference. You talked about Dr. King. He's a name that we remember. But there was a hell of a lot of people who worked to organize the Freedom March. There's a hell of a lot of people who worked to organize the Boycott, who actually were putting in a lot of effort behind the scenes. And those people were part of something that changed America. And, I talked about when Indivisible started, what I think Indivisible is. Indivisible helped change America. It helped change the state. It helped change this county. But it also helped change America. It got Donald Trump out of office once. and it can help get MAGA out again. I'm trying to stick to a couple of doers here. And what I would just ask all of you to do, if you actually want to have some change, if you actually want to make Illinois even more blue, but if you want to make the rest of the country blue in Illinois, is get off your butt. And you got to do it. That's what I'm asking you.
Two things left. One is to announce an event. We have a participant here tonight that's involved in Glen Ellen, the St. Mark's Episcopal Church. And then Thursday, July 17th, there's also an event right here in Naperville. They've got one in Glen Ellen as well. 393 North Main Street, Glen Ellen. It starts at 6 o'clock. Shine a light on due process. Just wanted to make that announcement. I want to talk a little bit about Renato Rising. Some of you have seen get the Indivisible emails, but they have a new program. They want to train 1 million Americans on the art of non-cooperation, community organizing, and campaigns. And the first event is tomorrow night. If you just Google Indivisible National, you'll find that event if you haven't seen it already. Is it on our website or our Facebook page, Nancy?
There's a couple of QR codes.
The QR codes on the table will take you there. That training could be maybe more doers, and we need more doers. So that's all good. And Thursday night, the new section of Washington Street where it's just opened, the one that's by the Burger King. That's the area that 4 organizations here in this community have targeted for their protest on Thursday evening. I believe it starts at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay, 5 o'clock. And the sidewalk is wide. I looked at it the other day. It's probably about 10 feet wide. That will accommodate a lot of folks on either side of the road. But if we happen to spill over into the sidewalks going north and south, that's good too. So the Naperville protest is there. There are several others in DuPage. So check one out on Thursday night. And I have a statement that I'm going to read. It comes from a thinking municipal leader. We're sick of this administrative state of government we have operating here in our country. We the people will not tolerate any longer to be subjected to such a system, nor will we submit. United we shall stand and take back our land. 2017, the statement was made. Unfortunately, we still have to make it now. But I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Nancy, do we have anything further I've forgotten?